Hey guys, tonight we step quietly into a world where the sun decides when your day is over, and your phone, well, it doesn't exist, which is probably already stressing you out just a little. The light is fading fast, and you're standing inside a modest 19th century home, watching shadows stretch across rough wooden floors as the last glow of dusk slips away. There's a chill creeping in, the kind that settles into your bones if you don't deal with it quickly. And honestly, you probably won't survive this, at least not without seriously missing central heating and takeout. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where in the world you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice is how quickly the day disappears. There's no gradual easing into night with glowing screens and overhead lights. Instead, dusk arrives like someone gently but firmly closing a curtain. You feel it in your body too, your energy dipping, your movements slowing. In the 1800s, this wasn't just poetic, it was biological reality. Without artificial lighting, your circadian rhythm aligns closely with the sun, and historians agree that most people naturally adjusted their routines to daylight cycles. You move toward the hearth, the heart of the home, where a small fire is already crackling. It's not just for warmth, it's your primary light source, your cooking station, and in a way your evening entertainment. You crouch slightly, extending your hands toward the flames, feeling that immediate comforting heat. It smells faintly of wood smoke and something earthy, maybe the remnants of the day's cooking. Lighting is precious here. Candles exist, of course, but they're not something you burn carelessly unless you enjoy the idea of spending a small fortune on wax. Many households rely on tallow candles made from animal fat, which burn with a dim, slightly greasy flame and a smell that would absolutely not pass modern home fragrance standards. Think less vanilla bean dream and more subtle essence of yesterday's dinner. You watch as someone, maybe another member of the household, carefully trims a wick and lights a candle anyway. The flame flickers, casting long, uneven shadows across the walls. It's just enough to see by, but it forces everything into a slower pace. Read possible, but your eyes will complain. Sewing? Sure. If you enjoy squinting like you're deciphering ancient runes, there's a quiet rhythm to this moment. Outside, the world is dimming into silhouettes. Inside, the house feels smaller, cozier, almost like it's drawing inward with the coming night. You can hear faint sounds from beyond the walls, maybe a distant cart rolling over uneven ground, or the low murmur of neighbours finishing their own evening routines. And here's something you might not expect. Evenings in the 1800s aren't necessarily silent or solemn. In fact, they can be surprisingly lively, depending on the household. But right now, in this early phase, there's a kind of transition happening. A shift from the labour of the day to whatever comes next. You take us perhaps on a simple wooden chair or a bench worn smooth by years of use. Comfort is relative. Upholstery isn't exactly plush, and you're very aware of it. You shift a bit, trying to find a position that doesn't remind you of every life choice that led you here. As your eyes adjust, you notice the details of the room more clearly. The walls may be bare or sparsely decorated. Furniture is functional, built to last rather than impress. Every object has a purpose and very little is wasted. This isn't minimalism as a lifestyle trend, it's necessity. There's also a subtle awareness of time passing. Without clocks in every room or glowing digits on your phone, you measure time differently. The length of a candle, the feel of your own fatigue, the sounds of others settling in. It's less precise, but oddly more intuitive. A quirky tidbit slips into your mind as you sit there. In some households, people used rush lights, which were essentially dried plant stems dipped in fat. They burned even dimmer than candles and needed constant attention. Imagine babysitting a tiny, smoky stick just to avoid sitting in complete darkness. Suddenly your worst Wi-Fi outage doesn't seem so bad. You lean back slightly, letting the warmth of the fire seep into you. There's a comfort here, but also a certain vulnerability. The darkness outside feels deeper without streetlights or passing cars. It's just night, thick, quiet, and a little mysterious. Historians still argue whether people in the 1800s felt this darkness as something comforting or unsettling. Some suggest it fostered a sense of closeness and reflection, while others believe it carried an undercurrent of fear, of the unknown, of what might be lurking just beyond the reach of firelight. You can kind of see both sides. On one hand, there's a peacefulness to it. On the other, every creak of the house suddenly sounds like it has intentions. Someone nearby stirs the fire, sending a brief shower of sparks upward. The room brightens for a moment, then settles back into its steady glow. It's mesmerizing, really. The way the flames move, unpredictable but hypnotic. You could watch them for hours, and honestly, people often did. This was entertainment, in a sense. Not exactly binge-watching, but it gets the job done. Your stomach gives a small, polite reminder that food is coming soon, or at least you hope it is. Evening meals in the 1800s are a central part of daily life, not just for sustenance, but for structure. They mark the transition from work to rest, from individual tasks to shared experience. But for now, you're in this in-between moment. The day isn't quite over, and the night hasn't fully taken hold. You're suspended in that soft, flickering space where everything slows down just enough for you to notice it. You glance toward the window. It's mostly dark now, the glass reflecting the candlelight more than showing the outside world. Your own faint reflection looks back at you, a little distorted, like you're already becoming part of this quieter, older rhythm. And as the fire continues its steady crackle, you realize something subtle but important. There's no rushing this evening. No notifications, no deadlines pinging at you, no endless scroll pulling your attention in a dozen directions. Just the fire, the fading light, and the long, unhurried stretch of night ahead. The warmth of the hearth lingers as movement begins to gather around you, subtle at first. Chairs shifting, footsteps crossing the floor, the quiet clink of pottery and metal. Supper doesn't announce itself with a timer or a cheerful notification. It unfolds gradually like everything else here, guided by habit and necessity rather than the clock. You rise, or maybe you're already standing, drawn toward the table by a mixture of hunger and routine. The table itself is sturdy, likely scarred from years of use, each mark a small memory of meals long past. There's no elaborate place setting waiting for you, no polished cutlery arranged just so, but there is intention in how things are laid out. Even in modest homes, the evening meal carries a kind of quiet importance. Food in the 1800s is practical, filling and deeply tied to the seasons. Tonight you might find yourself facing a simple spread, perhaps a thick stew, still steaming from its long hours over the fire, accompanied by coarse bread that's dense enough to double as a workout for your jaw. Vegetables, if present, are whatever could be grown or preserved. Root crops, cabbage, maybe some beans. Meat, if you're lucky, appears in small portions, stretched to feed everyone. Here's a mainstream historical fact that settles in as you take your seat. For many families in the 19th century, the largest meal of the day was often eaten earlier, around midday, especially for labourers. Supper, then, is lighter, but no less meaningful. It's less about refueling for work and more about gathering, about marking the close of the day. You sit, aware of the others around you. Family members, perhaps, or housemates, each with their own place, their own subtle role. Seating arrangements can reflect hierarchy without anyone explicitly mentioning it. The head of the household might occupy a particular chair, while others settle in around them in a pattern that feels almost instinctive. You notice how conversation begins, not loudly, not all at once, but in threads. A comment here, a quiet response there. It's not the constant chatter of modern dinners, where silence feels awkward. Here, pauses are normal. Comfortable even. You take a bite of the stew, and it's good. Not restaurant quality, but hearty, warming, and satisfying in a way that feels earned. Utensils vary. You might have a spoon, possibly a knife. Forks are becoming more common by the 1800s, but their use still depends on the region and the household. In some places, you'd still rely heavily on bread as a tool, scooping, dipping, and making sure nothing goes to waste. It's efficient, if a bit messy by today's standards. And then there's etiquette. It exists, but it's different. You're expected to be respectful, of course. No reaching across the table like you're diving for the last slice of pizza. But the rules are shaped by practicality. You eat what's there. You don't complain. And if you do complain, Well, let's just say you might not be invited to tomorrow's supper. A faint smile crosses your mind as you consider a quirky tidbit. In some households, particularly in earlier parts of the century, people believed that certain seating arrangements or behaviors at the table could influence luck or even health. For example, sitting in a drafty spot might not just make you uncomfortable. It could be seen as inviting illness. Suddenly, choosing your seat feels like a strategic decision. The candlelight flickers as someone shifts, casting moving shadows across faces and walls. It's a reminder of how fragile this little pocket of brightness is. Outside, the darkness presses close, but inside, there's this shared space of warmth and light. You listen as someone recounts a small detail from their day. Nothing dramatic, just a moment. Maybe a tool broke, or a neighbor stopped by, or the weather threatened rain but held off. These aren't stories you'd record in history books, but they're the fabric of daily life. You find yourself paying attention in a way that feels different, more present. There's also a subtle awareness of roles within the household. Someone likely prepared this meal, spending hours tending the fire, chopping, stirring. In many homes, this responsibility fell heavily on women or servants, depending on the family's means. It's labor-intensive, and it doesn't end when the food is served. Historians still argue whether these domestic roles were experienced primarily as burdens or as sources of identity and pride. The truth, as always, probably sits somewhere in the middle. You can imagine both the exhaustion and the quiet satisfaction of providing something essential. You take another bite, noticing the texture, the warmth. There's no rush to finish. Meals aren't squeezed between appointments here. They stretch, not endlessly, but long enough to feel complete. At some point, someone reaches for more bread, breaking it with a practiced motion. Another person pours a drink, maybe water, maybe a small amount of ale or cider. In many places, these low-alcohol drinks were safer than water, which wasn't always reliably clean. It's a practical choice that also adds a bit of comfort to the evening, and then, inevitably, there's that moment when hunger begins to fade. You lean back slightly, feeling the weight of the meal settle in. It's not heavy in a modern, overindulgent way, but it's enough to carry you through the night. The conversation shifts again, perhaps growing a little lighter. There might be a joke, nothing too elaborate, just a quick remark that earns a few quiet laughs. Humor here is understated, woven into the flow of things rather than standing apart. You glance around the table, taking in the faces, the small gestures. This is the core of the evening, really. Not the food itself, but the act of sharing it. The sense of being part of something, even if it's just a small household gathered around a worn table. Eventually, the meal begins to wind down. Dishes aren't cleared away instantly. There's a natural pause, a moment where everyone lingers just a bit longer, as if reluctant to break the circle. You become aware of the next phase approaching, the tasks that follow supper. Cleaning, tidying, preparing for the night ahead. There's no dishwasher waiting to hum quietly in the background. Everything will be done by hand in low light, with the same steady patience that's carried you through the rest of the evening. But for now, you sit in that after-meal stillness, the candlelight soft on your surroundings, the fire still offering its gentle warmth. It's a simple moment, but it feels full. And as you rest there, you realize something else. This routine, repeated night after night, is what shapes the rhythm of life here. Not grand events, not dramatic changes, but these small, consistent rituals. You might not have chosen this life, but in this moment you can understand it. Even if you're still secretly wishing for a pizza delivery that will never come, the last crumbs of bread disappear, and with that quiet, almost ceremonial end to supper, the room shifts again, not dramatically, just enough for you to feel it. Chairs scrape softly against the floor as people stand, stretch, and begin to move with purpose. The brief stillness after eating gives way to the next rhythm of the evening. Chores. You don't get to dramatically announce, "I'll just leave this for tomorrow." Tomorrow is already booked with its own set of demands, and tonight's work doesn't politely reschedule itself. So like everyone else, you fall into step. The table is cleared piece by piece. Bowls, plates, whatever passes for utensils. They're gathered and carried to a basin or a simple washing area. Water must often be fetched, and unless someone had the foresight to keep it warm near the fire, You're dealing with something brisk enough to remind you that comfort is optional in this century. You roll up your sleeves, metaphorically or literally, and begin. Washing dishes in the 1800s is less about sparkling perfection and more about functionality. A cloth, some water, maybe a bit of lye-based soap if the household has it. These are your tools. You scrub, rinse and set items aside to dry, all by the faint flickering light of a candle that seems to be working just as hard as you are. Here's a grounded historical fact. Before the widespread availability of running water, most households relied on manually carried water for all domestic tasks, from cooking to cleaning. That means every dish you wash represents not just effort now, but effort earlier in the day when that water was hauled in. Suddenly, leaving a dirty plate feels like a much bigger decision. The candle sputters slightly, and you instinctively glance at it. You're always aware of the flame, how long it will last, whether it might drip wax, whether it might go out at the worst possible moment. Lighting isn't something you take for granted, it's something you manage. Nearby, someone else might be engaged in mending. A small tear in a shirt, a loose button, these aren't things you toss aside for later, or replace with a quick online order. Clothing is valuable, often handmade or at least carefully acquired, and it's expected to last. You watch as nimble fingers guide a needle through fabric, the thread catching the light in brief flashes. You might even take up a needle yourself, though your modern instincts are probably whispering, there must be an easier way. There isn't. This is the way. And here's a quirky tidbit that might make you glance at your own outfit with newfound appreciation. In some households, fabric scraps were saved obsessively, reused for patches, quilts, or even stuffing. Nothing wasted, ever. That pile of miscellaneous stuff in your home suddenly feels less like clutter and more like a missed opportunity for 19th century level efficiency. The room fills with these small, purposeful actions. Someone sweeps the floor with a simple broom, gathering the day's dust and debris into a neat pile. Another tends to the fire, adjusting logs to ensure it burns safely through the evening without consuming more fuel than necessary. Every movement has intent, shaped by experience and necessity. You notice how the light changes as you move around. Away from the hearth, the candlelight feels thinner, more fragile. Shadows deep, corners of the room slipping into near darkness. You find yourself sticking close to the light, not out of fear exactly, but because it's simply easier. There's a quiet companionship in this shared work. Conversation continues, but it's softer now, more intermittent. Words are exchanged between tasks, woven into the rhythm of movement. You might comment on a particularly stubborn stain or the state of a worn-out sleeve, earning a brief response before attention returns to the task at hand. Historians still argue whether these evening chores were experienced as communal bonding or simply as unavoidable labor. From where you stand, it feels like both. There's a sense of togetherness, yes, but also a clear understanding that this work must be done, regardless of how anyone feels about it. Your hands grow slightly tired, your back reminding you that posture in the 1800s isn't exactly optimized for ergonomic comfort. You shift your weight, maybe stretch a little, then continue. There's no rush, but there's also no skipping steps. At some point, you become aware of the sounds. The soft scrape of a brush, the gentle clink of dishes, the faint crackle of the fire. It's a quiet symphony of domestic life, one that might have faded into the background for those who lived it daily, but for you it's strangely calming. You glance toward the door or window again. Outside is fully dark now, the kind of darkness that feels complete, uninterrupted by artificial light. It's a reminder of how self-contained this space is. This small circle of warmth and activity surrounded by a much larger, unseen world. There's also an underlying awareness of resourcefulness. Every task is done with care because resources are limited. Water, fuel, fabric, time, they all matter. You can't afford to be careless, and over time, that necessity shapes habits into something almost instinctive. You finish washing a final dish, setting it aside with the others. Your hands are a little rougher now, the skin feeling the effects of water and work. You dry them on a cloth that's seen better days, but still serves its purpose. Nearby, the mending is nearly done. The tear is closed, the button secured. It's not perfect, but it's strong, and that's what matters. You can't help but feel a small sense of accomplishment, even if it's not your handiwork. And then, gradually, the tasks begin to wind down. The floor is swept, the dishes are clean, the fire is steady. The room settles into a quieter state, the purposeful energy of chores giving way to something softer. You straighten up, taking a moment to look around. Everything is in its place, as much as it can be. There's a satisfaction in that, a sense that the day has been properly concluded. But the evening isn't over yet. There's still time before sleep, time that might be filled with simple pleasures or quiet rest. You can feel the shift coming again, from work to whatever passes for leisure in a world, without screens, without instant entertainment, without the endless scroll that usually claims your attention. You might be a little tired, maybe even tempted to call it a night right now, but something keeps you present, curious about what comes next. Because in this home, in this century, even the quiet moments have their own kind of story, and you're right in the middle of it, hands slightly sore, candlelight flickering and no skip button in sight. The last of the chores settles into stillness, not with a dramatic finish, but with a kind of collective exhale. You feel it in the room, the shift from doing to simply being. The fire has been adjusted, the dishes are stacked, the small responsibilities of the day finally loosen their grip. And now, without quite announcing it, the evening opens into something softer. You ease back into your seat, or perhaps onto a bench near the hearth, instinctively drawn again to the warmth and light. This is where the pace slows even further, where time stretches in a way that feels almost unfamiliar to you. No one reaches for a device. No one checks the time every few minutes. The evening exists without being measured. Leisure, in the 1800s, isn't about distraction. It's about presence. You're here fully, whether you plan to be or not. Someone nearby begins to speak, not in the practical tone of earlier, but with a hint of storytelling. It might be a memory, something that happened years ago, or a tale passed down from someone else. The kind of story that has been told enough times to gain a rhythm, a familiarity. You listen, the flickering firelight adding a kind of quiet drama to every pause and gesture. Storytelling is more than entertainment here. It's a way of preserving memory, of sharing knowledge, of making sense of the world. Before widespread literacy, and even alongside it, stories carried history in a way books couldn't always reach. A mainstream historical fact settles gently into your awareness. In many 19th century households, especially in rural areas, reading aloud became a common evening activity as literacy rates improved. One person would read while others listened, turning the act into a shared experience rather than a solitary one. You can imagine it now, someone holding a worn book, squinting slightly in the candlelight, their voice steady as it carries the words across the room. Maybe tonight, that's exactly what happens. A book is brought out, its pages slightly rough, its binding not quite perfect but still intact. The reader clears their throat softly and begins. The words come slowly at first, careful and deliberate, then more fluid as the rhythm takes hold. You find yourself drawn in, not just by the content, but by the act itself. There's something intimate about it. This sharing of a story in real time, shaped by the reader's voice, punctuated by the occasional stumble or pause. And if there's no book, there are still ways to pass the time. Simple games might emerge, nothing elaborate, just something to engage the mind and fill the quiet. Cards perhaps, or a small board game. The rules are known, the pace unhurried. You might join in, though you quickly realize that winning isn't really the point. It's more about the interaction, the shared focus. Still, a small competitive spark flickers in you, because apparently that part of human nature hasn't changed much. At some point, someone makes a light joke. Something about the game, or the day, or even the stubbornness of that one dish you scrubbed earlier. It earns a few chuckles, soft but genuine. Humour here doesn't need to be loud to land. And then there are the quieter moments. Someone might simply sit, hands folded, gazing into the fire. Another might continue a bit of mending, more out of habit than necessity. You notice how comfortable people are with silence. It's not something to fill, it's something to inhabit. Here's a quirky tidbit that slips in as you observe. In some parts of the 1800s, people believed that certain quiet evening activities, like spinning or sewing, could influence dreams or even protect against bad luck. Whether or not that's true is questionable, but it does add an extra layer of meaning to what might otherwise seem like simple tasks. You shift slightly, adjusting your position as the warmth of the fire reaches you. Your body feels the day now, the accumulated effort, the subtle fatigue that wasn't noticeable while you were busy. It's not overwhelming, just present. The candle burns lower, its flame smaller but steady. You're aware of its lifespan, of how much longer it might last. It becomes part of the evening's rhythm, a quiet countdown that no one explicitly acknowledges. Historians still argue whether people in this era experienced leisure as truly restful, or if it remained tinged with the awareness of ongoing responsibilities. Sitting here, you can feel both. There's relaxation, certainly, but also a sense that rest is earned, not assumed. You glance around the room again, noticing the way the light plays across familiar objects. The table now cleared, the chairs slightly worn, the small details that make up this space. It's not grand, not luxurious, but it's lived in, shaped by daily use. There's also a kind of mental space opening up. No news updates, no endless stream of content. Your thoughts have room to wander. You might reflect on the day, or think about tomorrow, or simply let your mind drift in a way that feels surprisingly natural. At some point, the activity, whatever form it's taken, begins to taper off. The story reaches a stopping point. The game concludes. The last thread is tied off. There's no abrupt ending, just a gradual easing into quiet. Someone yawns, not dramatically, just enough to signal what everyone is already feeling. The night has settled in fully now, and the body is ready to follow. You become aware of the sounds again. The fire, softer now. The faint creak of the house as it adjusts to the cooling air. Maybe the distant call of a night bird, or the whisper of wind against the walls. It's a different kind of quiet than earlier. Not the transitional hush of dusk, but a deeper, more settled stillness. You stretch slightly, feeling the pull of tired muscles. Your eyelids might be a bit heavier, your movements slower. There's no resisting it, and no real reason to try. Because here, in this moment, there's nothing left to prove, nothing left to finish. Just the slow, steady approach of sleep, waiting patiently at the edge of the firelight. And you, caught in that gentle space between waking and dreaming, where even the simplest evening begins to feel like something worth remembering. The final embers of conversation fade, just as the fire itself begins to settle into a softer glow, and you feel the shift without anyone needing to say it out loud. This is where the evening gives way to night, not abruptly, not ceremoniously, but in a slow, almost unnoticeable surrender. You rise, or maybe you're already halfway there, your body anticipating what comes next. Sleep in the 1800s isn't quite the uninterrupted 8-hour block you might be used to imagining. It's something more fluid, shaped by darkness, routine, and the limits of light itself. You move through the dim room, the candle now your small, flickering guide. Each step feels quieter than the last, as if the house itself is settling in alongside you. There's a carefulness in your movement, not just to avoid waking others, but to preserve the fragile calm that has settled over everything. Sleeping arrangements vary, but privacy is limited. You might share a bed, or at least a room, with others. Beds themselves are simpler than what you're used to. Wooden frames, perhaps with mattresses stuffed with straw, feathers, or whatever materials were available. Comfort is relative, and tonight you're about to redefine your standards. You sit on the edge of the bed, testing it. It creaks softly, a sound that feels almost like a greeting. You lie back, and it's not terrible, but it's also not the cloud-like experience modern marketing has promised you your entire life. You shift a little, finding a position that works well enough. Here's a solid historical fact that might surprise you. Many people in the 1800s practiced what historians call segmented sleep. They would sleep for a few hours, wake for a period in the middle of the night, and then return to sleep again until morning. This wasn't insomnia, it was normal. So if you wake up later and find yourself staring into the darkness, don't panic. Congratulations, you're historically accurate. You pull a blanket over yourself, noticing its weight, its texture. It's warm enough, though you're aware that colder nights could make this a much less comfortable experience. You tuck your arms in, instinctively conserving heat. The candle is either extinguished or left to burn out safely, depending on the household's habits. Darkness deepens quickly once the flame is gone. This isn't the soft, ambient darkness of a modern bedroom. It's complete, enveloping. You can't see your hand in front of your face, and for a moment it's almost disorienting. You listen. At first, there's nothing. Then, gradually, the sounds emerge. The house settling, wood shifting slightly as temperatures drop, the faint breathing of others nearby. Maybe a distant animal call from outside, carried through the night air. It's not silent. It's just different. A quirky tidbit drifts into your awareness as you lie there. In some parts of the 19th century, people believed that the position you slept in could influence your dreams or even your health. Sleeping on your back, your side, your stomach, it all had supposed meanings or consequences. Whether any of that holds up is another story, but it does make you momentarily overthink how you're lying there. You adjust slightly, just in case your mind begins to wander, as it often does in the absence of distraction. You think about the day, the work, the meal, the quiet moments by the fire. There's a simplicity to it, but also a weight. Life here is steady, but it's not easy. Historians still argue whether people in the 1800s experience better or worse sleep quality compared to modern times. On one hand, there's less artificial disruption, no blue light, no late-night scrolling. On the other, there are plenty of interruptions, shared spaces, environmental noise, physical discomfort. Lying here, you can see both sides. At some point, you drift off. Time passes, though you're not entirely sure how much, and then, as predicted, you wake. Not abruptly, not with a jolt, just a gentle return to awareness. The darkness is still complete, the house still quiet. This is the in-between period, the space between first and second sleep. You lie there for a moment, unsure what to do with yourself. In some households, people would use this time for quiet activities, prayer, reflection, even conversation if others were awake. You might simply lie there, listening again, letting your thoughts drift. There's no pressure to fall back asleep immediately. The night is long, and there's time. Eventually, your body guides you back toward rest. You shift, pulling the blanket closer, finding that slightly better position you didn't have before. Your breathing slows, your thoughts soften, and you slip once more into sleep. When morning comes, and it will, sooner than you might expect, it won't arrive with an alarm. It will come with light, gradual and persistent, filling the room just as the darkness once did. But that's still ahead. For now, you remain here, in this quiet, shared space, surrounded by the subtle sounds of a home at rest. The fire has burned low, the tasks are done, and the world outside is wrapped in night. You're part of it now, this rhythm that asks less of you in terms of speed, but more in terms of presence. And as you settle deeper into the mattress, into the darkness, into the steady, unhurried passage of time, there's a strange kind of comfort in knowing that nothing else is expected of you tonight. No messages to answer, no deadlines to meet, just sleep even if you do wake up in the middle of it, wondering briefly why it's so quiet, and why for once that quiet feels just right. Life inside a remote lighthouse in the 1800s. You don't so much arrive at the lighthouse as you're delivered to it. Like a parcel no one plans to pick up anytime soon. The boat that brought you here is already pulling away, its shape shrinking against the restless grey of the sea, leaving you standing on uneven rocks with the wind tugging insistently at your clothes. There's no dramatic farewell, no lingering wave, just distance growing by the second, and now it's you, and the tower, it rises beside you, solid and pale against the darkening sky, its height more imposing up close than it seemed from the water. You tilt your head back slightly, following its narrow windows upward to the lantern room perched at the top. That's your responsibility now. No pressure, the air smells of salt and something metallic, sharp enough to wake you up whether you want to be or not. Waves crash nearby with a steady, almost rhythmic force, sending up sprays that catch the fading light. You quickly realize that peaceful seaside retreat is not the vibe here. This is isolation with a soundtrack. You shift your footing on the damp rock, adjusting to the constant push of the wind. It doesn't gust and stop. It just keeps going like it's committed to the bit. Your hair, your clothes, your entire sense of balance are now at its mercy. There's no point lingering outside. You turn toward the heavy door at the base of the lighthouse, its surface worn by years of exposure. It opens with a bit of resistance, then gives way, revealing a dim interior that smells faintly of oil, stone, and something lived in. Inside, the wind softens but doesn't disappear. It hums faintly through the structure, a low, constant presence. The door shuts behind you with a solid thud, and just like that, the outside world feels farther away. You stand for a moment, letting your eyes adjust. The interior is narrow, practical. A spiral staircase curls upward along the inner wall, disappearing into shadow. Below, a small living space, basic but functional, waits for you. A table, a chair, a bed. Everything you need and nothing you don't. Here's a grounding historical fact. In the 1800s, lighthouse keepers were often required to live on site for extended periods, sometimes with their families, but frequently in near total isolation depending on the location. Relief keepers might come, but not always regularly, which means yes, this is home now. You take a few steps inside, your boots echoing faintly against the stone floor. There's a stillness here that feels different from the quiet of a house. It's not just the absence of sound, it's the absence of people, of movement, of anything unpredictable except the sea itself. A small window offers a view outside, but it's less of a scenic panorama and more of a reminder. Water in every direction, stretching out until it meets the horizon. No roads, no neighbours, no quick trips to anywhere. You exhale slowly, setting down whatever small belongings you've brought with you. There's not much space for them, and honestly, not much need. Life here is pared down to essentials. A faint creak from above draws your attention. It's just the structure settling, or the wind finding its way through some unseen gap. Still, it makes you glance upward, toward the long spiral of steps. You'll be climbing those. The lantern room at the top isn't just for show. It's the reason you're here. The light must be maintained, kept burning through the night to guide ships safely past this stretch of coast. It's a responsibility that carries real weight. Out there, beyond what you can see, people are depending on that light. No pressure again. You approach the staircase, placing a hand on the central column as you begin to climb. The steps are worn from years of use, each one slightly uneven. As you ascend, the air grows cooler, the sound of the wind a little more pronounced. Up and up you go, the spiral seeming longer than it should be. You lose track of how many steps you've taken, your legs beginning to notice the effort. It's not exactly a gym workout, but it's persistent. Finally, you reach the top. The lantern room is brighter than the rest of the lighthouse, though still dim compared to anything modern. Glass panes surround you, offering a wide, uninterrupted view of the sea. The light apparatus itself stands at the center, complex, polished, and slightly intimidating. This is where the real work happens. You step closer, examining the mechanism. Depending on the lighthouse, it might use oil lamps, reflectors, or even the relatively new Fresnel lens technology, which was a major advancement in the 19th century. These lenses could focus light into a powerful beam visible for miles, revolutionizing maritime navigation. It's impressive. Also slightly terrifying, considering you're now responsible for keeping it functioning. A faint smile tugs at your thoughts as a quirky tidbit surfaces. Some lighthouse keepers became so accustomed to the rotating beams of light that they reportedly experienced strange visual effects, even when away from the tower, like their vision expected the world to pulse in intervals. Imagine blinking and feeling like you're still on duty. Your brain just refuses to clock out. You circle the apparatus carefully, taking in the details. Everything needs to be clean, aligned, and fueled. Salt from the sea can build up quickly, and even a small issue could reduce the light's effectiveness. Historians still argue whether lighthouse keepers experience their isolation as peaceful solitude or as a form of psychological strain. Standing here, with the vast sea stretching out in every direction, you can feel the edge of both. There's beauty in the view, certainly, but also a sense of being very, very alone. You glance out through the glass. The light is fading now, the sky shifting toward deeper shades. Soon, the lantern will need to be lit, its beam cutting through the darkness. You're aware of the responsibility settling in, not heavily but steadily. This isn't a task you can ignore or postpone. Ships don't wait for convenience. You take one last look around the lantern room, then begin the descent back down the spiral staircase. Each step echoes softly, the sound following you like a quiet companion. Back at the base, the small living space feels slightly more familiar now, though still new in that way that hasn't quite settled into comfort. You move about, perhaps adjusting a few things, finding places for what little you have. Outside, the wind continues its endless conversation with the sea. Inside, you're beginning to understand the rhythm of this place, a rhythm defined by cycles of light and dark, of maintenance and waiting. There's no crowd here, no background noise of distant lives overlapping with yours. Just the tower, the sea, and the steady passage of time. And you, right at the centre of it, no notifications, no quick exits, just you and a very tall job description. You don't get long to stand around contemplating the poetic loneliness of your new life, because the lighthouse, your lighthouse now, demands attention almost immediately. The sun has dipped low enough to remind you that night is coming, and with it, your primary responsibility. The light must be ready. You make your way back up the spiral staircase, already feeling more familiar with its rhythm, though your legs might quietly disagree. Each step echoes slightly differently now, as if the tower is beginning to recognize you, or at least tolerate your presence. At the top, the lantern room greets you with that same wide, exposed view. The sky has deepened into richer shades, the horizon blurring where sea and night begin to merge. It's beautiful, sure, but also a very clear signal that it's time to get to work. You approach the lamp apparatus with a bit more purpose this time. Maintenance here isn't occasional, it's constant. Every evening, every morning, the system must be checked, cleaned and prepared. There's no skip maintenance option. If the light fails, even brief, the consequences could ripple far beyond what you can see. A grounded historical fact settles in as you begin. Lighthouse keepers in the 1800s were required to meticulously maintain their lamps and lenses, often cleaning the glass and polishing the reflectors daily to ensure maximum brightness. Even a thin layer of soot or salt could significantly reduce visibility. So yes, you are now the proud owner of a very high-stakes cleaning routine. You start with the glass panes, wiping away the fine residue left by the sea air. It's subtle at first, almost invisible, but as your cloth moves across the surface you see the difference. Clearer, sharper, every bit matters. Next comes the lens. If this lighthouse is equipped with a Fresnel lens, and many were by the mid to late 1800s, you're dealing with a marvel of engineering. Its concentric rings bend and focus light into a powerful beam, allowing it to travel miles across the water. It also requires careful handling. You clean it slowly, methodically, aware that this is not something you want to damage. There's no quick replacement waiting in a warehouse somewhere. If this breaks, you're in a very awkward conversation with, well, no one, because you're alone, which somehow makes it worse. The lamp itself needs attention too. You check the oil level, likely whale oil, or another fuel depending on the period and location. It's not exactly a pleasant-smelling substance, but it's essential. You refill it as needed, making sure everything is properly aligned. And here's where it gets a little humbling. Lighting the lamp isn't just striking a match and walking away. It requires precision. The wick must be trimmed just right to produce a steady, bright flame without excessive smoke. Too high, and you risk soot buildup. Too low, you adjust it carefully, your hands steady, your focus absolute. For a moment, everything else fades. The wind, the sea, the isolation. It's just you and this small, controlled flame that's about to become a beacon in the dark. You light it, the flame catches, flickers, then steadies. You watch it for a moment, making small adjustments until it burns clean and bright. Then, as the mechanism begins to do its work, whether rotating or fixed, you see the first sweep of light extend outward into the gathering night. It's subtle at first, but then unmistakable. A beam cutting through darkness, reaching farther than you can see. And just like that, you're on duty. A small, almost amused thought crosses your mind as a quirky tidbit surfaces. Some lighthouse keepers developed an almost superstitious relationship with their lamps, believing that a well-behaved flame meant a calm night, while a flickering or stubborn one hinted at trouble ahead. Whether there's any truth to that is questionable, but you can't help glancing at the flame with a bit of curiosity. So far, so good, but your work isn't done. Not even close. Maintenance continues throughout the night. You'll need to check the lamp regularly, ensure the wick remains properly trimmed, and keep an eye on the mechanism. If it's a rotating light, it may rely on clockwork that needs to be wound periodically. Yes, like an oversized, extremely important watch. You locate the winding mechanism and give it the necessary turns, feeling the resistance as it tightens. This is what keeps the light moving, creating that distinct pattern that ships recognize. Each lighthouse has its own signature, its own rhythm of light and dark. Out there, somewhere beyond your view, Sailors are watching for it. Historians still argue whether lighthouse keepers felt a strong connection to the sailors they served, or if the distance made it all feel abstract. Standing here, watching your light sweep across the water, you can imagine both. You don't see the ships, not clearly, but you know they're there, and they're counting on this. You step back slightly, taking in the full effect of the lantern room now alive with purpose. The glass reflects faint glimmers of the flame, the lens amplifies its reach, and the darkness outside seems just a little less absolute. Still, the elements don't take a break just because you've done your job. The wind continues to press against the tower, rattling faintly at the panes. The sea answers with its endless motion, waves crashing and receding in a rhythm that feels both constant and unpredictable. You remain alert, moving occasionally to check each part of the system. It's repetitive, yes, but not mindless. Each action carries weight, a quiet understanding that this routine is what keeps everything functioning. Time moves differently here. Without the usual markers, you measure it in tasks completed, in the steady burn of the lamp, in the gradual deepening of the night. At some point, you lean slightly against the wall, allowing yourself a brief pause. The light continues its sweep, the mechanism ticking softly. For a moment, you just watch. It's oddly calming, this repetition, the predictability of it. In a world that's otherwise defined by isolation and the unpredictable force of nature, this is something you can control, mostly, because of course, things can go wrong. A sudden gust, a mechanical issue, an unexpected drop in fuel. Any number of small problems could become big ones if left unattended. So even in your brief rest, there's an awareness, a readiness to act. You glance out again, trying to spot any sign of movement on the water. It's difficult. The night has taken hold, and the sea blends into the sky in a way that erases boundaries. But your light is out there, cutting through it all, and you're the one keeping it alive. No pressure, just an entire coastline depending on you not messing up a glorified lantern. You straighten slightly, returning to your quiet rounds, your steps measured, your attention steady. The night is long and your work is just beginning. But for now, the light burns bright, and that's enough. The rhythm settles in before you fully notice it, less like a schedule and more like a tide you've quietly stepped into. There's no dramatic shift marking the passage from one day to the next. Instead, time folds in on itself, repeating patterns that feel both grounding and, if you're not careful, a little too endless. Morning doesn't burst into the lighthouse. It seeps in. A pale grey light filters through the windows, softer than you might expect, as though the sun itself is hesitant to fully commit to this isolated place. You're already awake, or at least not fully asleep, because the night never really lets go of you completely. You rise, feeling the subtle stiffness from yesterday's work, and the climb up those spiraling steps that you're beginning to suspect were designed by someone with a personal vendetta against your legs. Still, there's no time for dramatic complaints. The lamp must be checked, cleaned, and prepared for the next cycle. Up you go again. The lantern room greets you with a different mood in daylight. Where it was dramatic and almost otherworldly at night, it now feels exposed, practical. The glass shows every smudge, every trace of salt left behind by the sea air, and there will be salt. You begin the routine again, cleaning, checking, adjusting. It's methodical, almost meditative. Your hands move with a bit more confidence now, the unfamiliarity of your first day giving way to a growing sense of competence. Here's a grounded historical fact. Lighthouse keepers were often required to log their daily activities, including weather conditions, maintenance tasks, and any sightings of ships. These logbooks became official records, sometimes used in investigations if a maritime incident occurred. So yes, you're not just a keeper of the light. You're also its official chronicler. You find the logbook, its pages already filled with careful handwriting from whoever came before you. Entries note wind direction, visibility, the condition of the lamp. You add your own, your handwriting perhaps a little uneven at first, as you adjust to writing in this environment. Clear morning, light maintained, wind steady. It feels simple, but there's a quiet weight to it. This record might matter someday, even if you never know when or why. The day stretches ahead, and here's where the true nature of lighthouse life begins to settle in. There is a lot of same. You descend the stairs again, your steps more automatic now. The living quarters feel smaller in daylight, their simplicity more apparent without the softening effect of candlelight. There's no clutter, no excess, just the essentials arranged for function. You find something to eat, nothing elaborate, just enough to sustain you. Meals here are solitary unless you're one of the few keepers stationed with family or assistants. The quiet of eating alone is different from the quiet of a shared table. It's not uncomfortable exactly, but it does give your thoughts more room than they're used to, and your thoughts will take that space. The wind continues its constant presence, occasionally rising in pitch as it moves around the tower. The sea answers in its own voice, waves breaking with a force that never quite becomes background noise. Together they create a kind of endless conversation that you're now part of, whether you like it or not. A quirky tidbit surfaces as you sit there. Some lighthouse keepers reported naming the sounds they heard, the wind, the waves, even the creaks of the tower, as if giving them identities made the isolation easier to bear. You can see the appeal. That particularly persistent whistle through a crack in the wall definitely feels like it deserves a name. Maybe not a friendly one. You glance around, half expecting the place to respond. It doesn't. But the idea lingers. The hours pass in small tasks, checking supplies, tidying the already tidy space, inspecting the structure for any signs of wear or damage. There's always something to do, but rarely anything urgent. At least, not during calm weather. And that's the thing about this life. It's balanced on the edge of unpredictability. Most days are steady, repetitive. But when something changes, when a storm rolls in, when equipment fails, it demands everything from you. Historians still argue whether this kind of routine fostered resilience or led to mental strain over time. Sitting here, with the same view stretching endlessly before you, you can feel how it might go either way. The predictability is comforting, but it can also blur the edges of time. You might find yourself wondering what day it is, not in a dramatic, lost all sense of reality way, just in that quiet, do I actually need to know, kind of. The afternoon light shifts gradually, the sky changing in subtle tones that you begin to notice more than you would in a busier life. Without distractions, even small changes become significant. You step outside briefly if conditions allow. The air hits you with that same salty sharpness, the wind greeting you like an over-enthusiastic host who never learned about personal space. You take a few careful steps, aware of the uneven ground and the constant motion of the sea. From here, the lighthouse looks different, less like a structure you occupy, and more like something you belong to. It stands firm against the elements, and now, so do you. You don't stay out long. The environment isn't exactly inviting, and there's always something pulling you back inside. The door closes behind you again, and with it, the outside world is reduced to sound and distant motion. Back inside, the afternoon continues its slow progression toward evening. You check the time, if you have a reliable way to do so, or simply rely on the light itself to guide you. The cycle is becoming familiar now. Day fades, preparation begins, the lamp is lit, the watch continues. You find yourself thinking less about leaving and more about maintaining. The shift is subtle but important. This place isn't just somewhere you are. It's something you're responsible for, and that responsibility fills the space where constant activity might otherwise be. As the light outside begins to soften again, you prepare to climb the stairs once more. The routine repeats, but it doesn't feel pointless. Each action has a clear purpose. Even if it's the same purpose as yesterday, you place your hand on the worn railing, starting upwards step by step. The wind hums, the sea answers, and you continue, caught in a rhythm that is as relentless as it is strangely steady. No shortcuts, no off days, just the tower, the light, and the long looping stretch of time that you're beginning to understand. Not by escaping it, but by moving with it. Even if part of you is still wondering how long it would take to invent a vacation, night returns the way it always does here, without ceremony, just a steady dimming until the horizon dissolves and the world becomes a series of shifting shadows. You're already moving before it fully settles in, your body now tuned to the rhythm of the tower. The climb feels less like effort and more like inevitability. At the top, the lantern room greets you again, familiar now in a way that would felt impossible not long ago. The glass panes reflect the last faint traces of daylight, and beyond them, the sea darkens into something vast and unreadable. You begin your routine without hesitation. The lamp is checked, cleaned and lit with practiced precision. The wick is adjusted just so, the flame coaxed into a steady glow. The mechanism is wound, the lens polished. Every step flows into the next, your hands remembering what your mind no longer needs to question. And then the beam, it sweeps outward into the night, cutting through the darkness in its steady rhythm. Light, shadow, over and over again, a silent signal sent into the unknown. This is your watch. You settle into it, moving occasionally to check the apparatus to ensure everything remains as it should. But there are longer stretches now where you simply observe. The sea at night is a different presence altogether. During the day, it's expansive, almost open. At night, it feels deeper, more mysterious. You can't see its full shape, only fragments, reflections of your own light catching on restless waves. You lean slightly toward the glass, scanning the distance, and then eventually you see it. A faint glow, far off, barely distinguishable from the darkness. A ship. It's not dramatic. There's no sudden music swell, no cinematic reveal. Just a small, steady light moving slowly across the horizon. But the moment you notice it, something shifts. That's why you're here. A quiet realization settles in as you watch it. That distant vessel with its unseen crew is navigating by signals like yours. They may not know you, may never think about the person inside this tower, but your light is part of their journey. Here's a grounded historical fact. Before modern navigation system, lighthouses were essential for maritime safety, helping ships identify coastlines, avoid hazards and determine their position. Each lighthouse had a unique light pattern, allowing sailors to distinguish one from another, which means that little rhythm you've been maintaining. The steady sweep of light isn't just routine, it's a language. You watch the ship for a while, its movement slow but steady. It doesn't come closer to you, not directly. It passes at a distance, guided by the awareness of where you are, rather than a need to reach you. It's a strange kind of connection, important but fleeting. A faint smile crosses your thoughts as a quirky tidbit surfaces. Some lighthouse keepers, desperate for any form of interaction, would note passing ships in detail, or even imagine stories about the people aboard them. Names, destinations, entire lives constructed from a single moving light on the horizon. You can see how that might happen. You might even catch yourself doing it now. Cargo vessel, you think, probably heading somewhere warmer. Definitely better food. The ship continues on its way, its light gradually fading into the distance until it becomes just another part of the night. And just like that, the moment passes, but the watch continues. The wind picks up slightly, pressing against the tower with renewed energy. You hear it more clearly up here, a steady force that never quite rests. The glass panes rattle faintly, and you instinctively check them, ensuring everything is secure. The flame flickers for a moment, reacting to a subtle change in airflow. You adjust it quickly, bringing it back to a steady burn. It's a small action, almost automatic now, but it carries that same quiet weight. Historians still argue whether lighthouse keepers felt a deep sense of purpose from these nightly watches, or if the repetition dulled their sense of meaning over time. Standing here, watching the beam sweep endlessly across the sea, you can feel both possibilities. There's purpose, undeniably. But there's also repetition. The hours stretch. You move through your checks, your brief moments of stillness. Time doesn't rush here. It lingers, expands, folds back on itself. At some point, you step away from the glass and sit, just for a moment. The light continues its work without interruption, the mechanism ticking softly in the background. You listen to it. That steady, reliable sound, turn, sweeps almost hypnotic. You might feel your eyelids grow a little heavier, your body reminding you that night is meant for rest, but you can't fully give in to that. Not here, not now, so you stand again, moving, staying awake, staying aware. Outside, the sea continues its endless motion. Inside, the tower holds steady, a narrow column of light and responsibility in the vastness of night. Another distant glow might appear, or maybe not. Some nights are busier than others. Some pass with nothing but darkness and your own thoughts. And your thoughts, they wander. You think about the world beyond this place. The towns, the roads, the lives moving forward in ways that feel distant now. It's not that they're gone, they're just not here. Here there is only this, the tower, the light, the watch. You move once more to the lamp, checking the wick, adjusting it slightly. The flame responds, steadying again. It's a small interaction, but one that reinforces your role in this quiet system. You are the keeper. And as the night deepens, as the wind hums and the sea answers, as the beam continues its endless sweep into darkness, you remain at your post, not because anyone is watching, but because someone somewhere might be. And that's enough to keep you here, awake in the lantern room, guarding a light that never truly belongs to you, but depends on you all the same. Even if, just for a moment, you wonder what it would feel like to be on that distant ship instead, heading anywhere else. The night doesn't end so much as it thins out. At first, it's barely noticeable, a slight softening of the darkness beyond the glass, a faint suggestion that the horizon is still there, waiting to reappear. You're still moving through your watch, still checking the lamp, still listening to the steady rhythm of the mechanism. But something in the air begins to shift. Morning is coming. You stand near the lantern, watching as the beam continues its sweep, now less alone in the world than it was hours ago. The sky slowly lifts from black to deep grey, then to a muted blue that spreads cautiously across the sea. It's not dramatic, no grand sunrise performance, just a gradual return of visibility, and with it a quiet sense of release. Your watch is nearing its end. You move through the final checks with the same care as before, though there's a subtle easing in your movements now. The lamp has held steady through the night. The mechanism has done its work. No emergencies, no sudden failures. A good night by lighthouse standards. Here's a grounded historical fact. Lighthouse keepers were often required to extinguish the light at dawn to conserve fuel and prevent unnecessary wear on the lamp. It wasn't just about letting the sun take over. It was about efficiency and preservation. So you prepare to do just that. You approach the lamp, your movements deliberate. The flame, steady and reliable, has been your constant companion through the long hours of darkness. And now as daylight strengthens, it's time to let it rest. You adjust the wick, slowly reducing the flame. It flickers slightly, then steadies at a lower intensity. You watch it for a moment, ensuring the process is controlled, careful. Then gently you extinguish it. The absence of the flame is immediate. The lantern room feels different without it. Quieter, less alive in a way. The glass now reflects the growing daylight instead of the warm glow of fire. You stand there for a moment, letting the transition settle in. A quirky tidbit drifts into your thoughts. Some lighthouse keepers reportedly felt a strange sense of loss when extinguishing the lamp each morning, as if they were ending a conversation that had lasted all night. It's an odd idea, but standing here now, you can almost understand it. The light wasn't just a task, it was a presence. And now it's gone, at least for a while. You begin the post-watch routine. The lamp must be cleaned again, any soot carefully removed, the lens inspected for salt or residue. Even after a smooth night, there's always maintenance to be done. The cycle never really stops. It just shifts efficiency, your hands already familiar with the process. What felt meticulous and slightly intimidating on your first night now feels manageable. Not easy, exactly, but known. Outside, the sea reveals itself again, its surface textured with light and motion. The same waves that felt mysterious and almost unknowable in the dark now appear more domain, though no less powerful. You glance out, half expecting to see a ship, but the horizon is mostly clear. If anything passed during those last quiet hours, it's already gone, leaving no trace but the memory of its brief presence. Historians still argue whether lighthouse keepers became more attuned to these subtle transitions, light to dark, presence to absence, or if the repetition caused them to blur together over time. Standing here, you feel a bit of both. Each moment is distinct, but also part of something larger, something continuous. You finish your tasks in the lantern room and take a final look around. The space feels different in daylight, less dramatic, more functional, but it still holds that quiet significance. This is where the night's work happens. This is where you keep watch. You turn and begin the descent, step by step. The spiral staircase carries you back down, each footfall a soft echo in the now brighter tower. The air warms slightly as you descend, the living quarters below coming into view. Back at the base, the space feels almost welcoming now. Familiar at least. You move through it with a bit more ease, your body already adjusting to its layout, its limits. You sit perhaps or lean back slightly, allowing yourself a moment to rest. Not sleep, not yet, but a pause. The kind that feels earned. The wind is still there, of course. It hasn't gone anywhere. It hums around the tower, a constant presence that you're beginning to accept rather than resist. The sea continues its endless motion, visible now through the window in shifting patterns of light. This is your environment, not temporary, not occasional. There's a subtle realization that settles in as you sit there. The isolation hasn't lessened. If anything, it's become clearer, but it's also less sharp, less jarring than it was when you first arrived. You've begun to fit into it just slightly. The routines, the tasks, the cycles of light and dark. They give structure to what might otherwise feel like an overwhelming emptiness. They don't remove the solitude, but they shape it into something you can move through. You stretch a little, your body reminding you that rest is still part of the equation. Sleep will come again, though perhaps in segments, woven between the responsibilities of the tower. And when night returns, and it will, sooner than you might expect, you'll climb those stairs again. You'll light the lamp, tend the flame, watch the horizon. The cycle continues. A final thought lingers, quiet but persistent. This life isn't about constant change or excitement. It's about steadiness, reliability, being present in the same place, doing the same essential work over and over again. And somehow that repetition becomes its own kind of meaning. You glance once more toward the staircase, then toward the window, where the sea stretches endlessly beyond your view. No crowds, no easy escape, just the tower, the light. And you still here, still keeping watch even when the lamp is dark. Everyday chores inside an 18th century colonial home. You wake before the light fully arrives, not because you set an alarm, but because your body and frankly your responsibilities don't give you much of a choice. The air is cool, carrying that faint, earthy stillness of early morning, and for a brief moment you consider the radical idea of staying under your blanket. It's a nice thought. It lasts about 3 seconds, because in an 18th century colonial home, the day doesn't wait for you to feel ready. It begins whether you like it or not, and you are very much part of it. You sit up, the bed creaking softly beneath you. It's not luxurious, more practical than comfortable, but it's done its job. You swing your feet onto the floor, feeling the chill of the surface beneath you. No slippers waiting conveniently nearby. Just you adjusting quickly. The room is dim, lit only by the faintest hint of dawn creeping through a small window. You move carefully, not out of fear, but out of habit. Everything here has its place, and even in low light you're expected to know where that is. Your first task isn't glamorous, it's the fire. You make your way to the hearth, the center of the home's activity. Overnight, the fire has died down to embers, faintly glowing but not nearly enough to be useful. You crouch, reaching for kindling and carefully coaxing the remaining heat back to life. This isn't a quick process. You arrange small pieces of wood, blow gently to encourage the embers, and wait. There's a patience required here that modern life rarely demands. No instant ignition, no convenient switch. Just you, your breath, and a bit of stubborn determination. Eventually, the flame catches. It's small at first, hesitant, then stronger as it feeds on the kindling. You add larger pieces of wood, building it up until it becomes a steady, reliable fire. The warmth begins to spread, subtle but noticeable, pushing back against the morning chill. Here's a grounded historical fact. In 18th century colonial homes, maintaining the hearth fire was essential, not just for warmth, but for cooking, cleaning, and even basic hygiene. Letting it go out completely could mean significant effort to restart it, sometimes requiring borrowing embers from a neighbor. So yes, keeping this fire alive is basically your version of maintaining civilization. No pressure, you stand, brushing your hands lightly, already aware that this is just the beginning. The fire will need tending throughout the day, fed, adjusted, watched. It's not a one-time task. It's a constant presence. You glance around the room as the light slowly improves. The home is simple, built for function rather than display. Wooden surfaces, handmade furniture, tools and utensils placed where they can be easily reached. There's a sense of order here, but it's a practical one. You take a moment, just a moment to stretch, your body already anticipating the work ahead. There's a faint soreness from yesterday, a reminder that this routine is cumulative. Each day builds on the last, and then you move. What is next? There's no turning a faucet, no convenient stream waiting at your command. Water must be fetched, carried and managed carefully. You gather whatever containers are used, buckets, jugs, and step outside into the early morning air. It's brisk, sharper than inside, and it wakes you up immediately. The sky is lightening now, soft colours spreading across it as the sun prepares to rise. It's beautiful in a quiet way, but you don't have much time to stand and admire it. You head toward the water source, a well perhaps, or a nearby stream. The ground beneath your feet is uneven, familiar but not forgiving. You've walked this path before, many times, and you'll walk it many more. Dorong water is work. If it's a well, you lower the bucket, feeling the rope slide through your hands, then haul it back up, the weight increasing as it fills. It's not impossible, but it's not effortless either. You steady it, then pour the water into your containers, repeating the process as needed. If it's a stream, the task shifts slightly, but the effort remains. Bending, lifting, carry-ons up. A quirky tidbit surfaces as you work. In some colonial communities, water sources were social hubs, places where people exchanged news, gossip and updates. But at this hour, you're more likely to encounter quiet than conversation, which, honestly, might be a blessing before coffee becomes a thing. You lift the filled containers, feeling the weight settle into your arms. This is where you really notice it. The physical demand of something as simple as water. Every drop you carry is a drop you'll use later, and none of it comes easily. You make your way back, steps steady, careful not to spill. By the time you reach the house, your arms are already reminding you that the day has officially begun. Inside, you set the water down, taking a brief pause. Not a long one, just enough to shift your grip, roll your shoulders, prepare for the next task, because there is always a next task. Historians still argue whether people in colonial households perceive this constant labour as an accepted norm or as a daily burden. Standing here, with the fire now burning and the water freshly drawn, you can feel both sides. It's simply life, but that doesn't mean it's easy. You begin to use the water, some for cooking, some for cleaning, some set aside for later. Every use is intentional. There's no waste, no excess. The light continues to grow, filling the room more fully now. The day is no longer approaching, it's here, and you're already deep into it. No slow starts. No just 5 more minutes. Just the steady, unrelenting rhythm of work that defines this life. You glance briefly toward the door, where the morning stretches out beyond it, full of tasks yet to be done. The fire crackles softly behind you, the water sits ready, and your body is already adjusting to the pace. This is how it begins every day. And as you take a breath and move toward the next chore, you realize something quietly important. You don't ease into this life. You wake up, and it's already in motion. The morning doesn't slow down. It builds. The fire you coaxed to life earlier now demands attention again. Its flames licking steadily at the wood as you begin the next phase of the day, preparing food, not just for yourself, but for the household, and not just for now, but often with an eye toward later. Cooking here isn't a quick task squeezed between other obligations. It is the obligation. You move toward the hearth, already feeling its warmth on your face. The tools are simple. Iron pots, maybe a skillet, utensils that have seen years of use. Everything is slightly worn but dependable. There's no preheating setting, no time, no helpful beep to remind you that something's ready. You are the timer. You begin assembling what you have. Ingredients are limited, shaped entirely by what's available seasonally or what has been preserved. Cornmeal perhaps, or oats. Maybe some leftover bread, a bit of salted meat if supplies allow. Every meal is a quiet exercise in resourcefulness. Here's a grounded historical fact. In 18th century colonial homes, cooking was done almost entirely over an open hearth, requiring constant attention to heat levels by adjusting the position of pots and pans rather than controlling a flame. Temperature control, in other words, is entirely manual and a little bit guesswork. You hang a pot over the fire, adjusting its height carefully. Too close, and you risk burning the contents. Too far, and you'll be waiting long enough to question your life choices. You stir slowly, watching as the mixture begins to thicken, the scent rising faintly into the room. It's not exactly a gourmet experience, but it's warm, filling and reliable. As you work, you notice how much of this process is about multitasking. While one thing cooks, you prepare another. While you wait, you clean. There's no standing around watching water boil like it's a form of entertainment, though honestly, it might still qualify compared to staring at a loading screen. You reach for a cloth and begin wiping down surfaces, clearing away any remnants from earlier tasks. Cleanliness matters, but it's a constant effort. Dust settles quickly, ash drifts from the hearth, and every activity leaves behind some trace that needs to be addressed. A quirky tidbit slips into your thoughts as you work. In some colonial households, certain cooking smells were believed to linger in ways that could affect future meals or even health, leading to specific rituals around cleaning and airing out the space. Whether that's scientifically sound is debatable, but it does make you wonder how many generations blamed bad vibes on yesterday's stew. You stir again, adjusting the pot slightly. The fire responds unpredictably at times, flaring up or settling down depending on the wood, the airflow, and a dozen small factors you're slowly learning to read. Nearby, other tasks compete for your attention. Maybe there's grain to grind, using a hand mill that requires steady effort. The repetitive motion becomes almost hypnotic, though your arms quickly remind you that this is less meditation and more upper body workout. You might pause briefly, flexing your fingers, then continue. There's no skipping steps here. If the grain isn't ground, the meal isn't complete. Simple as that. Historians still argue whether the relentless nature of these domestic tasks fostered a sense of discipline and resilience, or simply wore people down over time. As you shift between stirring, grinding and cleaning, you can feel both interpretations tugging at your thoughts. There's a rhythm to it, yes, but also a weight. The food begins to come together. You ladle it out, portioning it carefully. Nothing is wasted. Every bit matters, every scrap accounted for. You might set some aside for later, knowing that the next meal isn't guaranteed to be any easier to prepare. You take a moment to taste it, just a small bite. It's plain but satisfying. There's a certain pride in that, even if it's not something you'd post about online with a perfectly filtered photo. Just made this over an open flame, no big deal, you think, imagining the caption. It would absolutely not go viral. You allow yourself a brief pause to eat, standing or sitting depending on the space and the demands of the moment. Meals here aren't always leisurely affairs. Sometimes they're quick, functional, fuel for the next round of work. As you eat, your eyes drift around the room. The fire, the tools, the surfaces you've just cleaned. It's all part of a system that requires constant attention. Nothing runs on its own. Everything depends on someone, on you. And the moment you finish, that responsibility returns. Dishes, again. You gather them, moving toward the water you fetched earlier. It's still there, waiting, because of course it is. You wash carefully, aware of how much effort went into obtaining that water in the first place. Every drop used is a drop that had to be carried. You scrub, rinse, set aside. The process is familiar already, though no less time-consuming. Your hands feel it, the repetition, the exposure to water, the subtle roughness that comes with constant work. Outside, the day continues to unfold. The light grows stronger, the sounds of the environment shifting as the world fully wakes up. But inside, the rhythm remains steady, focused. There's always something else to do. You glance toward the door again, aware that more tasks await beyond it. Laundry, perhaps. Repairs. Food preservation. The list doesn't end, it just changes shape. You take a breath, not a long one, just enough to reset. The fire crackles softly. The last dish is set aside and the space is once again in order. For now, because in this life, finished is always temporary. You straighten, already moving toward the next task, your body adjusting to the ongoing rhythm. Your mind settling into the understanding that this is not a series of chores. It's a continuous cycle. And you're right in the middle of it, hands busy, thoughts steady, and no skip ad button in sight. By now, your arms have already had a full morning workout, and yet, somehow, the most physically demanding task is still waiting for you. Laundry, not the modern version where you toss everything into a machine, press a button, and feel vaguely productive while doing absolutely nothing. No, this is laundry in its purest, most stubborn form. Water, fabric, and effort. A lot of effort. You gather the clothes, linens, anything that needs cleaning. It's a smaller pile than you might expect. Not because things don't get dirty, but because washing them is such an involved process that it's done less frequently. Every item matters, and every item takes time. You carry the bundle, along with your buckets, back toward the water source. Yes, again, that pleasant little stroll you took earlier. It's now part of your daily fitness routine, whether you signed up for it or not. The air feels warmer now, the sun higher, but the work hasn't become any easier. You reach the well or stream, setting everything down for a moment to catch your breath. Not a dramatic pause, just enough to remind yourself that you are, in fact, human. Then you begin. Water is drawn, lifted, poured, again and again. You fill your containers, aware of the weight, the repetition. There's no shortcut here, no clever trick that suddenly makes this effortless. Here's a grounded historical fact. In the 18th century, laundry often involved soaking clothes, scrubbing them with lye-based soap, and then beating or rubbing them to remove dirt. It was a process that could take an entire day, depending on the volume and conditions. So yes, this is your day now. You dip a piece of clothing into the water, working the soap into the fabric. The soap itself isn't exactly luxurious. It's harsh, practical, and not particularly kind to your hands. You scrub, focusing on areas that need extra attention, your movements firm and repetitive. Then comes the rinsing, and the wringing, and the repeating. Over and over again, your arms begin to feel it quickly, the steady strain of lifting, twisting, pressing water out of heavy fabric. It's not a dramatic exhaustion, it's a slow build, a quiet reminder that this work is relentless. A quirky tidbit slips into your mind as you work. In some colonial community, wash day was such a significant event that it shaped the entire weekly schedule, with other tasks planned around it. It wasn't just another chore, it was the chore. You can see why. You shift your stance slightly, adjusting your grip on a soaked garment that feels heavier than it has any right to be. Water drips steadily back into the basin, each drop a small victory, though there are many, many drops to go. Historians still argue whether the communal nature of laundry, when done alongside others, made it more bearable, or if the sheer physical strain overshadowed any social benefit. Standing here, mostly alone with your thoughts and a growing pile of damp fabric, you might lean toward the latter, though to be fair, a little company wouldn't hurt. You continue settling into the rhythm. Scrub, rinse, wring, repeat. The sounds are simple. The splash of water, the movement of fabric, the occasional rustle of leaves or distant call of a bird. It's not loud, but it fills the space in a way that keeps you grounded in the task. Time stretches. You lose track of how long you've been at it, your focus narrowing to the immediate action in your hands. There's no multitasking here. Laundry demands your full attention, your full effort. Eventually, the pile begins to shrink. You notice it slowly, almost reluctantly. Each completed piece is set aside, clean but still damp, waiting for the next stage, drying. You'll need to hang them carefully, in a place where they can catch the air and sun. You gather the washed items, lifting them with slightly tired arms, and make your way back. The return trip feels longer, though that might just be your muscles offering their opinion on the situation. Back at the house, you find space to hang the clothes, lines, fences, anything that will hold them. You drape each piece carefully, smoothing it out as best you can. There's a small satisfaction in seeing them there, clean and orderly. Even if they're not quite dry yet, you step back, taking it in for a moment. Then you realize your hands. They're rougher now, the skin feeling the effects of water, soap, and constant friction. You flex your fingers, noticing the slight stiffness, the faint soreness. No hand cream, no quick fix, just adaptation. You return inside, the shift from outdoor light to indoor dimness briefly disorienting. The hearth is still there, steady and reliable, as if reminding you that while you were busy with one task, it quietly continued its role. There's always something else. Maybe it's preparing more food, or tending to repairs, or simply putting things back in order. The work doesn't pause just because one major task is complete, but you do allow yourself a brief moment, just a moment. You sit or lean, letting your body rest. Not fully, not deeply, but enough to acknowledge what you've just done. Because this wasn't small work. This was hours of effort, of repetition, of physical demand that doesn't announce itself loudly, but makes its presence known all the same. And tomorrow, some version of this will happen again. Maybe not laundry, but something just as demanding. You take a breath, steady and slow, then push yourself back up. Because in this life, rest isn't the absence of work. It's the space between one task and the next. Your arms haven't quite forgiven you for the laundry, And yet the day keeps moving forward with that same steady insistence. There's no dramatic transition into the next set of tasks. Just a quiet andanchi. Survival here depends on thinking ahead. Because daily chores keep you going, but seasonal work keeps you alive. You step outside again. The air now warmer, the sun settled into its place overhead. The world feels more active at this hour, though busy looks different here. It's not crowds or noise, it's movement with purpose, each action tied to a longer timeline than just today. You turn your attention to what needs preparing, preserving, repairing. Food comes first. What you gathered, grew, or acquired earlier in the season doesn't simply sit and wait to be eaten. It must be managed carefully, preserved against time, weather, and decay. You move toward a small workspace, perhaps a table outdoors or near an open window, where the process begins. If it's vegetables, you might be slicing, drying, or preparing them for storage. If it's meat, the process becomes more involved, salting, curing, ensuring it lasts beyond just a few days. Every step, because mistakes here don't just mean inconvenience, they mean hunger later. Here's a grounded historical fact. Colonial households relied heavily on preservation methods like salting, smoking, and drying to store food through seasons when fresh supplies were scarce. Without refrigeration, these techniques were essential for survival. So yes, you're basically running a long-term food strategy with zero margin for error. You work carefully, your movements deliberate. There's no rushing this. Each piece must be prepared correctly, placed properly, checked regularly. It's less like cooking and more like planning for a future you can't fully predict. A quirky tidbit slips in as you continue. In some colonial communities, certain preservation methods were passed down with almost ritualistic precision, with families guarding their techniques closely, like secret recipes, but with much higher stakes than impressing dinner guests. You imagine someone dramatically whispering, "Never salt before sunset." And honestly, you're not entirely sure it didn't happen. You set aside what you've prepared, arranging it in a way that makes sense for storage. Space is limited, and organization matters. You can't afford to lose track of what you have. From there, your attention shifts to the structure around you. Homes in this period require constant upkeep. Wood expands and contracts with weather. Tools wear down. Small issues can quickly become larger ones if ignored. You might inspect a section of wall, a hinge, a piece of furniture, anything that shows signs of strain. You pick up a tool, simple, effective, and begin making small repairs, tightening, adjusting, reinforcing. It's not glamorous work, but it's necessary. There's a quiet satisfaction in fixing something before it breaks completely. Historians still argue whether this constant need for maintenance fostered a deeper connection between people and their environment, or if it simply added to the unending list of responsibilities. As you work, you can feel that balance again. There's pride in it, but also fatigue. You pause briefly, wiping your hands, taking in the surroundings, the house, the yard, the tools, the food you've prepared. It's all part of a system that depends on your effort. And then there are the smaller tasks, the ones that don't seem urgent but can't be ignored. Maybe it's tending to a garden, checking on crops or plants that need attention. You move through the rows, inspecting leaves, adjusting soil, pulling away anything that doesn't belong. It's careful work but important. These plants represent future meals, future security, or perhaps it's something as simple as organizing supplies, ensuring everything is where it should be. In a world without easy replacements, knowing what you have and where it is half the battle. The hours pass steadily, marked not by a clock but by the position of the sun, the lengthening shadows, the subtle shift in the air as afternoon begins to lean toward evening. Your body feels it, the accumulated effort of the day. Fetching water, cooking, cleaning, washing, preparing, settles into your muscles. It's not overwhelming, but it's there, a constant reminder of what you've done. You straighten slowly, stretching your back, rolling your shoulders. There's a brief moment where you consider stopping, just calling it a day early. And then you remember, there's still evening. A faint, amused thought crosses your mind. Modern productivity advice would absolutely collapse under the weight of this schedule. Take breaks, prioritize self-care. Meanwhile, you're over here negotiating with a pile of firewood and a future winter. Speaking of which, you glance toward the stack of wood nearby. Fuel is another constant concern. If it's not already prepared, it will need to be. Cutting, stacking, ensuring there's enough to last through colder days. It's all connected. Every task feeds into another, every effort building towards something beyond the present moment. You gather what you've worked on, bringing it back inside or securing it for later. The light is beginning to soften again, the day slowly winding down, though not quite finished. The house greets you with that familiar sense of contained space. The hearth still steady, the interior holding on to the warmth of the day. You move through it, setting things in place, preparing for what comes next. Because evening here isn't just rest. It's transition from labour to recovery, from effort to just enough stillness to do it all again tomorrow. You take a breath longer this time, feeling the weight of the day settle into something more manageable. And as the light outside continues to fade, you realise something quietly important. This isn't just work, it's preparation for tomorrow, for winter, for survival itself. And you've been part of it, every step of the way, even if your arms are still filing complaints about that laundry. By the time the light begins to soften into evening again, your body already knows what your mind is just catching up to. You are tired. Not in that casual, I could go for a nap kind of way, but in the deeper, more complete sense that settles into your muscles and quietly announces itself with every movement. The day hasn't been dramatic. No single moment stands out as overwhelming. And yet, the accumulation of it, the fire, the water, the cooking, the cleaning, the washing, the repairing, has built into something solid. You feel it as you move back inside, the house welcoming you with its familiar warmth and faint scent of smoke. The hearth is still alive, though softer now, its glow less intense but steady. It's been your companion all day, quietly anchoring everything. You pause for a moment near it, not out of necessity, but because your body seems to request it. Just a second to stand still, to let the warmth reach you. And then, of course, there's still something to do. Evenings don't erase responsibilities. They just reshape them. You might prepare a simple meal, something lighter than earlier, using what's available. The process feels familiar now, almost automatic. Your hands move with less hesitation, your awareness of the fire more instinctive. Here's a grounded historical fact. In many colonial households, the evening meal was simpler than earlier ones, often consisting of leftovers or quickly prepared food, as most of the day's energy had already been spent, which makes perfect sense because right now, the idea of preparing anything elaborate feels like a personal attack. You stir, adjust, portion. The food comes together without much thought, your focus more on finishing than perfecting. You sit or lean and eat slowly, not rushed but not lingering either, just enough to restore a bit of energy. A quirky tidbit drifts into your thoughts as you eat. In some households, people believed that eating too heavily in the evening could disrupt sleep or even lead to strange dreams. Given how exhausted you feel, you suspect you could eat an entire loaf of bread and still fall asleep instantly. But it's an interesting idea. You finish, setting things aside. There will be cleaning, of course, but it's done with a softer pace now. The urgency of the day has passed, replaced by a quieter rhythm. You wash what needs washing, using the remaining water carefully. Your hands, already worn from earlier tasks, move through the process with practiced efficiency. It's not easier, but it's familiar. Historians still argue whether people in colonial times experienced this end-of-day fatigue as satisfying or simply unavoidable. Standing here, moving through these final chores, you can feel both. There's a sense of completion, but also the undeniable awareness that tomorrow will bring the same demands. You finish, setting the last item aside, and then, finally, there's a pause. Not a long one, not an indulgent stretch of rest, but a real one. You sit perhaps near the hearth, the fire casting soft, shifting light across the room. The shadows feel gentler now, less like something to navigate and more like part of the atmosphere. Your body settles, your shoulders drop slightly, your breathing slows. The constant motion of the day gives way to stillness, and for a moment you simply exist without doing. It's a rare feeling here. The sounds of the house become more noticeable, the faint crackle of the fire, the occasional creak of wood, the distant whisper of wind outside. It's quiet but not empty. You glance around, taking in the space, the tools, the surfaces, the small details that have been part of your entire day. Everything is in its place, at least for now. There's a subtle satisfaction in that. You might think back on what you've done, not in a reflective, philosophical way, but in a simple acknowledgement. The fire was kept, the water was fetched, the food was prepared, the clothes were washed, the repairs were made. It was enough. A faint, tired smile crosses your thoughts as you realize something. There's no lingering to-do list buzzing in your mind. Not because there's nothing left to do, but because what's left belongs to tomorrow. And tomorrow, well, tomorrow will take care of itself. Or rather you will. You shift slightly, feeling the pull of fatigue again. Your body is ready to rest, and this time you don't argue with it. You rise, moving toward where you'll sleep. The process is simple. No elaborate routine, no endless preparation. Just the basics, done with quiet efficiency. You lie down, the surface familiar now in its simplicity. It's not perfect, but it doesn't need to be. At this point, comfort is less about softness and more about stillness. You settle in, pulling whatever covering you have into place. The warmth from the day lingers slightly, enough to keep the chill at bay. The fire continues its soft glow in the background. A steady presence even as you begin to drift. Your mind slows. The thoughts that carried you through the day begin to fade, replaced by a softer, quieter awareness. There's no scrolling, no late-night distractions, no sudden bursts of activity, just rest. And as you lie there, listening to the gentle sounds of the house, feeling the weight of the day finally ease, you realize something that might surprise you. This exhaustion, it's different. It's not the scattered, restless kind. It's complete, earned. And as your eyes close, as the firelight dims behind you, as the world outside settles into night once more, you drift into sleep with the quiet understanding that this rhythm, this cycle of effort and rest, isn't just part of life here. It is life, and tomorrow, without question, it will begin again. Imagine traveling by stagecoach across 1800s Europe. You don't board the stagecoach so much as you're folded into it. There's a moment, just before you climb in, where you look at the vehicle and think, this seems manageable. A sturdy carriage, a few seats, a roof overhead. It almost looks charming, like something out of a painting where no one ever mentions leg cramps. Then you step inside, and reality gently but firmly corrects you. The space is tighter than expected, already occupied by fellow passengers who have claimed their portions of the bench with quiet determination. You hesitate for half a second, calculating how you might fit without accidentally sitting on someone's lap. Or becoming part of their luggage. Spoiler, you will absolutely become part of someone's luggage. You squeeze in, adjusting your position inch by inch until you find something that resembles a seat. Your knees immediately make the acquaintance of the person across from you. There's no avoiding it. Personal space, as a concept, has been politely left behind at the station. The door shuts with a solid click, sealing you into this shared arrangement. And then, with a jolt that travels through the wooden frame and into your spine, the journey begins. The wheels creak into motion, the horses pulling forward with steady force. You feel every movement, every shift in weight, every uneven patch of road translate directly into your body. There's no suspension to speak of, just wood, iron, and the hope that your bones are feeling cooperative today. You glance around at your fellow passengers. There's a quiet acknowledgement among you all, a shared understanding that this will be an experience. A grounded historical fact settles into your awareness. Stagecoaches in the 19th century were one of the primary means of long-distance land travel across Europe, often carrying passengers, mail, and goods along established routes that connected cities and towns. Travel times were slow, conditions were rough, and comfort was negotiable. You shift slightly, trying to find a position that doesn't immediately protest. It's not easy. The seats are firm, the space limited, and the constant motion ensures that any brief moment of comfort is temporary at best. The coach lurches again, hitting a rut in the road, and you feel it ripple through the entire structure. Your head bobs slightly, your shoulders tensing instinctively. You glance out the small window, watching as the landscape begins to move past you. Fields stretch out in muted colours, dotted with occasional buildings, trees swaying gently in the breeze. It's picturesque, in a distant, I'm glad I'm not walking through it kind of way. Inside, the air is shared, there's no delicate way to put it. Between the close quarters, the layers of clothing, and the length of the journey, you become very aware that ventilation is more of a suggestion than a guarantee. A faint, amused thought crosses your mind. This is essentially the original version of a long-haul flight, except with more dust and significantly fewer snacks. Speaking of which, food. You don't get a meal service here. Whatever you brought with you is what you have, and you'll need to ration it carefully. Stops will come eventually, but they're not exactly frequent or luxurious. The coach continues its steady progress, the rhythm of the wheels becoming a constant backdrop. It's not smooth, but it's consistent enough that your body begins to anticipate the motion, adjusting in small ways. You notice the driver's voice occasionally, calling out to the horses, guiding them along the road. It's a sound that cuts through the enclosed space, reminding you that there's a world just beyond these walls, one that you're passing through, rather than fully experiencing. A quirky tidbit surfaces as you settle in. Some stagecoach passengers, unable to endure the cramped interior, chose to ride on top of the coach instead, exposed to the elements but with more space. It was cheaper too. Of course, it also meant dealing with wind, rain, and the constant risk of being bounced off if you weren't careful. You glance upward instinctively. Maybe not today. Inside, the social dynamics begin to take shape. There's a polite silence at first, each person adjusting to the situation. Then, gradually, small interactions emerge. A nod, a brief comment about the road, perhaps even a shared complaint about the lack of space. It's not exactly lively conversation, but it's something. Historians still argue whether stagecoach travel fostered meaningful social connections or simply forced strangers into temporary coexistence. Sitting here, knee to knee with people you met 5 minutes ago, you can see both sides. There's potential for camaraderie, but also a strong incentive to just endure quietly. The hours begin to stretch. Time moves differently when you're confined like this. Each mile feels earned, each bump a reminder of the distance yet to go. You shift again, trying to relieve the pressure on one leg, only to transfer it to another. Your body is already negotiating with you. You glance out the window again, watching as the scenery changes gradually. Fields give way to patches of forest, the road winding through landscapes that feel both expansive and distant. You're moving through Europe, but not quite in it, more like observing it from a slightly uncomfortable bubble. The light shifts slowly, the sun climbing higher, casting stronger shadows. Inside the coach, the temperature adjusts with it, sometimes warmer, sometimes cooler, depending on the wind and the position of the sun. You become aware of the small details, the creak of the wood, the occasional rattle of something stored beneath the seat, the steady rhythm of hooves against the road. It's not quiet, but it's consistent. At some point, you realize that this confined, moving space is your world for now. There's no stepping out whenever you feel like it, no quick breaks. You're committed to the journey whether you're comfortable or not. You shift again, earning a brief glance from the person beside you, who is clearly having their own internal conversation with their spine. Solidarity. The coach continues forward, mile after mile, the road stretching out ahead in a line that feels both endless and inevitable. And as you settle into the rhythm, uneven, persistent, and just a little unforgiving, you begin to understand something. This journey isn't about comfort, it's about endurance. And you've only just begun. The rhythm of the road doesn't improve, it just becomes familiar. At some point, your body stops expecting comfort and instead begins negotiating with discomfort. Like, all right, if we shift slightly to the left and pretend this wooden edge is intentional, maybe we can survive another hour. It's not exactly success, but it's progress. The stagecoach rattles forward, wheels grinding against uneven ground, every stone and rut translated directly into your spine. There's no smooth cruising here, just a continuous series of small impacts that remind you, quite persistently, that roads in the 1800s are more of a suggestion than a promise. You brace yourself instinctively as the coach dips into a deeper groove, the entire cabin tilting slightly before righting itself. Someone across from you exhales sharply. No one complains out loud, but there's a shared understanding. This is not a luxury experience. Here's a grounded historical fact. Even on major European routes, roads in the 19th century were often poorly maintained, especially outside major cities. Rain could turn them into mud traps, while dry conditions left them hard and deeply rutted. making travel slow and physically taxing, which explains why your back is already filing formal complaints. You glance out the window again, watching as the landscape continues to shift. Rolling fields stretch into the distance, occasionally broken by clusters of trees or small villages that appear and disappear as you pass. There's a beauty to it, but it's fleeting, always just out of reach. Inside, the air grows warmer, the shared space amplifying every change in temperature. You adjust your position slightly, which is a polite way of saying you attempt a complex maneuver involving minimal elbow movement and maximum negotiation with the person next to you. They shift too, and for a brief moment, you achieve something resembling mutual comfort. It lasts approximately 6 seconds. The coach hits another bump and everything resets. A faint smile crosses your thoughts as a quirky tidbit surfaces. Some stagecoach companies experimented with improved suspension systems, leather straps, or thorough braces that allowed the cabin to sway slightly rather than absorb every shock directly. It was considered cutting-edge comfort at the time. You imagine explaining that to your modern self. Good news, the carriage swings slightly instead of slamming you into a wooden wall. Truly, innovation, the motion continues, relentless but oddly rhythmic. Your body begins to anticipate it, adjusting in subtle ways. You learn to lean just before a turn, to brace just before a dip. It's not conscious at first, but it becomes instinct. Time stretches. Without a clock, or at least without one you can easily check. You measure the journey in sensations. The stiffness in your legs, the dryness in your throat, the slow shift of light through the window. You might attempt conversation. It starts cautiously. A comment about the road, perhaps, or the weather. The person beside you responds, and for a moment, the shared discomfort becomes a point of connection. They might tell you where they're headed, or where they've come from. Stories unfold in fragments, shaped by the limited space and the constant motion. You listen, contributing when you can, the exchange offering a brief distraction from the physical reality of the journey. Historians still argue whether these interactions led to meaningful connections or remained purely situational, fleeting exchanges between people who would likely never meet again. Sitting here, knee to knee with strangers, you can feel the temporary nature of it. And yet, in this moment it matters. The coach slows slightly, then picks up again, the driver guiding the horses along the winding road. You hear the faint jingle of harnesses, the occasional call from outside. It's a reminder that this journey is not just about you and your fellow passengers. It's a coordinated effort between people and animals, all moving together. You shift again, your legs beginning to protest more insistently now. There's a particular kind of discomfort that comes from being unable to fully stretch, to stand, to move freely. It builds gradually, then settles in as a constant companion. You glance toward the door, not because you can do anything about it, but because your brain briefly entertains the idea of escape. It's a nice thought. It remains a thought. Outside, the landscape changes again. The road narrows, winding through a patch of forest where the light filters through leaves in shifting patterns. It's cooler here, the air carrying a faint scent of earth and greenery that contrasts with the enclosed space of the coach. For a moment, it's almost refreshing. Then the coach hits another uneven patch, and you're reminded that nature is beautiful, and also not particularly concerned with your comfort. The hours continue to pass, each one blending into the next. You eat a small portion of whatever you've brought, careful not to make a mess in the limited space. It's not exactly a relaxing meal, more like a strategic refueling. Waters is sipped sparingly. You're aware that opportunities to refill may be limited, and the last thing you want is to run out halfway through a stretch of road that seems determined to last forever. Your fellow passengers go through similar motions, eating, adjusting, occasionally speaking, often just enduring. There's a quiet camaraderie in it, even if it's not openly acknowledged. At some point you realize that the constant motion has become almost hypnotic. The repetition of bumps, the steady roll of wheels, the rhythmic clatter. It creates a kind of background that your mind begins to drift against. You might even find yourself zoning out, your thoughts wandering in that half-focused way that comes with long, repetitive journeys. And then, another jolt. Back to reality continues, the road stretching on, the destination still somewhere ahead. You don't know exactly how far, or how long it will take to get there. You just know that you're moving toward it, one uneven mile at a time. You shift again, earning another brief glance from your neighbour. This time there's a hint of shared humour in it, an unspoken "we're in this together." And you are, for now, because in this moment, in this cramped, rattling space, the journey isn't just about distance, it's about endurance, adaptation, and the quiet understanding that comfort is optional, but forward motion is not. And the road? The road has no intention of getting any smoother. Eventually, mercifully, the coach slows. It's not subtle. The rattling eases, the horse's pace shifts, and you feel that long-awaited change in momentum ripple through the carriage. Conversations pause, bodies straighten slightly, and there's a shared, silent realization among all of you. You're stopping, not forever, of course. That would be too generous. But long enough to stretch, breathe, and briefly remember what it feels like to exist outside of a moving wooden box. The coach pulls into a small roadside inn, the kind that seems to exist solely for moments like this. It's not grand, no sweeping architecture or welcoming luxury, but it stands there with quiet reliability, a checkpoint in a journey defined by long stretches of road. The door opens and fresh air rushes in like an old friend you didn't realize you missed. You step out carefully, your legs taking a second to remember how to function properly. There's a brief wobble, nothing dramatic, just a gentle reminder that sitting in a cramped position for hours has consequences. You stretch not elegantly, not subtly, just fully, and it feels incredible. A grounded historical fact settles into your thoughts. Stagecoach routes were organized around regular stopping points known as coaching inns, where horses could be changed, passengers could rest, and mail could be exchanged. These stops were essential to keeping long-distance travel moving efficiently. Efficient, of course, being a relative term. You take in your surroundings. The inn is modest, built for practicality rather than comfort. A few other travellers move about, some arriving, others preparing to depart. There's a quiet energy here, temporary, transitional. The space is warm, carrying the scent of food and wood smoke. You step in, immediately aware of how different it feels compared to the coach. More room, more air, less elbow negotiation. You find a place to sit, or at least to lean, your body grateful for the change. The opportunity to rest properly, even for a short time, feels almost luxurious. What's available isn't extravagant. Simple dishes, hearty and filling. Bread perhaps, some stew, maybe a bit of cheese. It's not about variety, it's about sustenance. You eat, this time without the constant jostling of the road. The difference is remarkable. You can actually focus on the act of eating, rather than strategizing how to avoid spilling something onto your lap, or worse, onto your neighbour. A quirky tidbit slips into your thoughts as you take another bite. Some coaching inns developed reputations for particularly good, or notoriously bad, food, and experienced travellers would plan their journeys around stops when possible. You imagine someone saying, "We must endure 3 extra hours of bone-rattling travel, but the soup at the next inn is worth it." Honestly, you'd consider it. Around you, conversations unfold. Travellers exchange stories. Drivers coordinate the next leg of the journey. Innkeepers move efficiently between tasks. It's a brief intersection of lives, all moving in different directions. Historians still argue whether these inns served as important social hubs, fostering connections and the exchange of ideas, or if they were simply functional stops in an otherwise isolated journey. Sitting here, listening to fragments of conversation, you can feel both possibilities at play. There's connection, but it's fleeting. You might speak with someone new, a fellow traveller heading in a different direction. The conversation is light, shaped by the knowledge that it doesn't need to last. There's a certain freedom in that. No long-term expectations, just a shared moment in time. Outside, the horses are being changed. You step out briefly to watch, curiosity pulling you toward the process. The animals are unhitched, replaced with fresh ones that will carry the coach forward. It's a practiced routine, efficient and purposeful. There's a quiet appreciation for it. This journey doesn't just depend on roads and wheels. It relies on the strength and endurance of these animals, moving steadily from one stop to the next. You glance back at the coach. It looks the same as before. Solid, practical, slightly unforgiving. And yet, after a short break, it doesn't seem quite as intimidating. Your body feels a little better now, not completely recovered, but improved. The stiffness has eased slightly, the tension reduced just enough to make the idea of getting back inside acceptable. Almost the driver calls out, signaling that it's time to continue. And just like that, the pause ends. You take a final breath of open air, a last stretch, and then you climb back in. The space greets you again, familiar in its constraints. You settle into your seat, adjusting once more, finding that delicate balance between comfort and inevitability. The door closes, the coach lurches forward, and the journey resumes. There's something different now, though. Not dramatically so, but subtly. The brake has reset your perspective just enough to make the motion feel less overwhelming. You've experienced relief, and now you return to the rhythm with a bit more patience. Outside, the scenery continues to shift, the road unfolding ahead. Inside, the same group of passengers settles back into place, the temporary camaraderie deepening slightly through shared experience. You might even exchange a small smile with someone, a quiet acknowledgement of the cycle you're all part of. Endure, pause, endure again. The wheels turn. The road stretches on, and as the coach carries you forward once more, you realize that these brief stops, these moments of stillness, aren't just breaks. They're what make the journey possible, even if they end far too quickly. The road doesn't care that you had a nice little break. In fact, if anything, it seems slightly offended by your temporary comfort and decides to remind you exactly who's in charge. The coach rolls forward with renewed determination, and almost immediately you feel it. The uneven ground, the subtle sway, the familiar jolt that travels straight through your carefully readjusted posture. Welcome back. You settle in again, though settle is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. Your body finds its previous compromises, like returning to a position in a game you never quite mastered. The person across from you shifts as well, a quiet synchronization of discomfort. Outside, the sky begins to change. Clouds gather, slowly at first, like they're just considering the idea of bad weather. The light softens, shadows fading into a more muted tone. You notice it through the window, that subtle shift that suggests something less pleasant might be on its way. And sure enough, the wind picks up. It presses against the sides of the coach, slipping through small gaps and reminding you that insulation, at this point in history, is more of a hopeful concept than a guarantee. You pull your clothing a little tighter, adjusting against the growing chill. A grounded historical fact comes into focus. Stagecoach travel was highly dependent on weather conditions, and storms could significantly delay journeys, damage roads, or even make certain routes impassable for days. So when the first drops of rain hit, you understand immediately. This could get interesting. The sound begins softly, a light tapping against the roof of the coach. It's almost soothing at first, blending with the rhythm of the wheels, but it doesn't stay gentle for long. The rain intensifies. The tapping becomes drumming, steady and persistent. The road beneath you changes as well, the dry, uneven ground turning slick and unpredictable. You feel it in the movement of the coach, the slight slides, the heavier resistance as the wheels push through mud. The driver calls out to the horses, his voice sharper now, more focused. The pace adjusts, not quite slowing, but becoming more cautious. Inside, the atmosphere shifts. There's a subtle tension now, a collective awareness that this isn't just another stretch of road. The elements are involved and they don't negotiate. You glance out the window, watching as the landscape blurs slightly through the rain. What was once clear and defined is now softened, edges blending into one another. It's beautiful in its own way, but also a little unsettling. A quirky tidbit drifts into your mind. Some travellers in this era carried small personal items specifically for bad weather. Extra cloth, waxed coverings, even improvised solutions to keep water out of their belongings. Not exactly high-tech, but surprisingly effective. You check your own situation instinctively, adjusting what you can. There's only so much control you have here, but every little bit helps. The coach jolts more sharply as it hits a deeper patch of mud, the wheels struggling for a moment before finding traction again. You brace yourself, your hands gripping whatever is available. Seat, edge, anything stable. Historians still argue whether these unpredictable conditions were seen as an accepted risk of travel or a constant source of anxiety for passengers. Sitting here, feeling the coach shift beneath you, you're leaning toward both. There's an understanding that this is part of the journey, but that doesn't make it comfortable. The rain continues, steady and unrelenting. Water finds its way into small spaces, a faint drip here, a damp edge there. It's not overwhelming, but it's persistent. Another layer of inconvenience added to the experience. Your fellow passengers grow quieter now, their earlier conversations replaced by focused stillness. Everyone is listening, feeling, adjusting, and then a sharper jolt. The coach lurches unevenly, one side dipping more than the other. The motion is abrupt enough to draw immediate attention, your body reacting before your mind fully processes it. The coach slows, then stops. For a moment, there's silence, just the sound of rain and the horses shifting outside. You glance around, meeting the eyes of the others, a shared question hanging in the air. What now? The door opens and the driver steps down, inspecting something near the wheels. You can't see everything from inside, but you catch glimpses. Mud, the angle of the coach, the position of the wheel. A problem, not catastrophic, but enough to halt progress. You wait, listening as voices exchange outside, decisions being made. This is part of the reality of travel here. Delays aren't exceptions, they're expected. Eventually, the driver returns, explaining briefly. The wheel is stuck, the ground too soft. It will take some effort to free it, which of course means you might be helping. You step out into the rain, the cool air hitting you immediately. The ground beneath your feet is soft, uneven, each step requiring careful balance. You move toward the side of the coach, where the wheel is indeed lodged in a stubborn patch of mud. There's no dramatic hero moment here, just practical effort. You and the others position yourselves, hands finding purchase where they can. The driver gives instructions, clear and direct plilv. You lean into it, feeling the resistance immediately. The coach doesn't move at first, the mud holding firm. You adjust your footing, try again, putting more weight into it. Slowly, very slowly. The wheel lifts slightly, the suction of the mud breaking with a heavy, reluctant sound. You push again, your muscles engaging fully now, the effort undeniable. And then, movement, the wheel frees itself, rolling forward just enough to regain position. The coach steadies, no longer tilted, no longer stuck. You step back, catching your breath, rain still falling steadily around you. It's not a grand victory, but it's a necessary one. You climb back inside, slightly damp, slightly more aware of the physical reality of this journey. The space feels different now, not just cramped, but shared in a more tangible way. You've all just pushed a coach out of the mud together. That's bonding. The door closes again, the driver takes his place, and with a firm call to the horses, the journey resumes once more. The rain continues, the road remains uncertain, and the destination is still somewhere ahead. But now, you understand something a little more clearly. This journey isn't just about sitting and enduring. Sometimes, you have to get out and push. By the time the rain finally eases, it doesn't feel like a victory, just a quiet shift. The sky lightens gradually, the steady drumming on the roof softening into the occasional drip. Outside, the road remains damp and heavy, but the worst of it has passed. Inside the coach, there's a collective exhale, subtle but real, as if everyone had been holding just a bit of tension without realizing it. You adjust your position again, carefully, slowly, because your body has reached that stage where even small movements require negotiation. The dampness in your clothes from earlier has settled into a cool cling, not unbearable, but definitely noticeable. The coach continues forward, slower now, the driver cautious on the softened road. The rhythm has changed. It's less jarring than before, but heavier, as if each turn of the wheels carries a bit more effort. Time stretches again. But something is different. There's a sense now, faint at first, that the journey is nearing its end. You don't have a precise marker for it. No sign flashing almost there. But you feel it in the way the driver handles the horses, in the occasional glance exchanged between passengers. You're getting close. A grounded historical fact settles into your thoughts. Stagecoach journeys could last hours, days, or even weeks depending on the distance, with passengers enduring long stretches of discomfort punctuated by brief stops and unpredictable delays. And now, after all that, you're approaching the final stretch. You glance out the window again. The landscape has shifted once more. Fewer open fields, more signs of habitation. Buildings appear more frequently. Roads begin to look slightly more defined. It's subtle but unmistakable. civilization. You sit up a little straighter, or at least attempt to. Your spine protests, you remind you of every hour spent in this confined space, but there's a quiet push forward in your energy. Anticipation. A quirky tidbit drifts into your mind. Some travelers describe the final approach to their destination as both a relief and a strange adjustment, as if their bodies had grown so accustomed to the motion that stillness felt unfamiliar. You can already sense that might be true. The coach rolls onward, passing more signs of life. People walking, small carts moving along the road, the distant sound of activity that hasn't been filtered through wooden walls and rattling wheels. Inside, your fellow passengers begin to shift more frequently, gathering belongings, adjusting clothing, preparing for the moment when the door will open and this shared experience will come to an end. Historians still argue whether these journeys left lasting impressions on travelers or simply blended into the broader experience of movement in a pre-modern world. Sitting here now, feeling the accumulated weight of the trip in your body, it's hard to imagine forgetting it entirely. This isn't something you casually move past. The coach slows gradually at first, then more noticeably. The rhythm that has defined your world for so long begins to fade, replaced by a steady, quiet emotion, and then it stops. There's a brief pause, almost like the journey itself is taking a breath. Then the door opens, and light spills in, brighter than it seemed through the window. You step out carefully. Your legs take a moment to adjust, the ground feeling strangely stable beneath you. There's a slight hesitation in your movement, a subtle recalibration as your body transitions from constant motion to stillness. You stand there for a moment, taking it in. The air feels different, less confined, more open. The sounds are clearer, no longer filtered through the structure of the coach. People move around you, their lives continuing in ways that feel both familiar and slightly distant. You've arrived. There's no grand announcement, no dramatic conclusion. Just a quiet understanding that the journey, the long, uneven, sometimes uncomfortable journey, is over. You gather your belongings, such as they are, your movements slower now, not from urgency but from the lingering effects of the trip. Every step carries a trace of what you've just experienced. You glance back at the coach. It stands there, unchanged, ready for its next journey, its next group of passengers. There's something almost surreal about it, that this thing which has defined your world for so long is now just an object, a vehicle, not your entire reality. A faint, tired thought crosses your mind. You'll never take standing still for granted again. You turn away, stepping forward into whatever comes next. The ground is steady, the space around you open, and for the first time in what feels like a very long time, you can move without calculating every inch. There's a quiet sense of accomplishment in that. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just earned. You take a breath, deeper than the ones you managed inside the coach, and let it out slowly. The journey has left its mark, not in any visible way, but in the way your body feels, in the way your awareness has shifted. Travel, you realize, isn't just about getting from one place to another. It's about what you endure along the way. And as you walk forward, leaving the coach behind, you carry that with you, not as a burden, but as something quieter, something steady. Because now you know what it means to cross distance the hard way. One jolt, 1 mile, one long, rattling stretch at a time.